it's almost as if we think it's going to be a place full of Singhs, nobody else. But the whole point is that whoever is there is allowed to believe in what they want to. But the Sikhs are also allowed to believe in what they want to, because there's so much happening against Sikhs in India that it should be freedom for all.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the main focuses of Khalistan.
That's a good point, that, because I think you look at the stability of Khalsa Raj when it did exist in Punjab. It's probably any time that the region actually had some stability, because Punjab's been a doormat to India. If you look at the history, all the attacks that took place, Punjab was the place that was hit first. So the stability came during probably the times of peace were probably the times of Khalsa Raj, at the times of Baba Banda Singh, Bahadur and Maharaj Ranjit Singh's Raj. So that's a very good example. So it's almost sometimes, we're overcritical about, can Sikhs have a Raj under the structure of that Khalsa way of thinking? We've got good examples of it.
I think we do. I mean, we can look back in those days. We can also look back into more modern history. I mean, if we look in the 70s when the Anandpur Sahib resolution was written. I mean, looking at that's got the basic things in there. It's got, the aim is to promote Sikhi. On top of that is to promote human coexistence, human welfare, eradicate poverty, starvation, eradicate the issue of caste and creed, removal of diseases, improve everybody's health. This is what Singhs were thinking about in the 70s when they were actually writing the resolution.
Because you would
this is what was then, what Singhs were after, wanted to promote the Anandpur Sahib resolution.
I mean, one could imagine, even looking at Maharaja Ranjit Singh's times, you would think that in that time, if they wanted to, everybody could have been forcefully made into Sikhs.
Of course, yeah.
But they weren't. That's why we're still a minority. And it's that kind of special, it's just incredible. We're the only kind of community that have that unique belief system of believe and let believe. Coexistence, exactly.
And there's no better example of that than Guru Tegh Bahadur Sahib, because he set that example that everybody has the right to practice their own faith. And, going back to sort of what we were going towards, Guru Tegh Bahadur Sahib, and his sacrifice in standing up for someone else's belief, even though the Gurus themselves have been critical about some of those actual practices, Guru Tegh Bahadur Sahib still understood or felt that the structure of those Kashmiri Pandits, those Brahmins, they needed to exist. I mean, they were the high caliber, cream of the crop, if you want to call it, of the faith, of the Hindu faith. There would have been the scholars, there would have been the political figureheads, the cooks, the doctors, as you call it. So if they were under pressure, if they fell through, then the whole faith, it would have collapsed. He hasn't been given that title, Hind each other, for no reason. He maintained, and Hinduism in that region exists today. We can be proud to say that exists today because of Guru Tegh Bahadur Sahib's sacrifice and giving his head. Haji?
We spend a lot of time as Sikhs. Sometimes, we said in the last show about how is Sarbat Apala exclusive to Sikhi, and sometimes we get, we say something like, how during Khalsa Raj it was so unique that everyone was allowed to flourish. I don't think that's a fair statement, because we see it from our eyes as Sikhs, from the Punjabi and the Sikh community. But if you look at England today, it's actually the same thing. Although it is a predominantly Christian country, as a Sikh, we have the full freedom of expression here. So yes, Guru Nanak Dev Ji did plant that seed, but we've got to be a little bit careful that we don't take sole ownership of this, because Guru Nanak Dev Ji wasn't necessarily the first person to have done something like that. And so yes, Guru Nanak Dev Ji should be recognized for the immense amount of work and revolutionary work. That Guru Nanak Dev Ji's work as a revolutionary is often forgotten. When we see the picture of Guru Nanak Dev Ji, we always imagine him as a buzurg. Every picture you see in everyone's house is Guru Nanak Dev Ji as a buzurg. We forget that he was 16. We forget that he was 25. We forget that he was 31. We forget that when he stood up to Babur, he was a young man. We forget these steps in Guru Nanak Dev Ji's life as a revolutionary from day one. When he went on his udasis, he was, it went through his whole life.
Yeah.
But he was also still a young man, and we forget that, and then we were saying that quite often with empowering the youth, when we see our guru in the form of a buzurg, we always look, and we often end up with that information coming from the buzurgs.
Very good point. That's a really good point. That. I mean, I think maybe that's. I mean, often paintings. I think that one of our biggest problems I think we have is that we see paintings and we automatically relate that as being reality, and we don't have these kind of thoughts. Like you said, that's a brilliant way of putting it. Guru Nanak Dev Ji was a young man. You know, he was a teenager when he stood up, you know, to these, you know, situations. And often those pictures that we see, like I said, the picture of the prison, we don't see what Guru Nanak Dev Ji hardships they went through. I mean, often I'd say, even the picture of Guru Arjan Dev Ji sitting on the Tavi with a white chola, it often makes it look like it was, you know, it wasn't...
It romanticizes
it romanticizes it. I mean, Guru Arjan Dev Ji went through 5 or 6 days of torture. You know, the Tati Tavi was just one of the tortures that he went through. You know, he was hot sand, he was wrapped in cowhide, you know, he was, you know, tortured, you know, there's so many different forms of torture. But yet, when we see those pictures, then it doesn't really take time. Even with the Sahibzade as well. I mean, the tortures that the Choti Sahibzade went through, you know, we see a very romantic picture of a brick wall being built. And you think, you know, they hands up in the air and stuff, which is uplifting in itself, but also doesn't show us or give us a real feel of what the Sahibzade actually went through. You know, they were tortured. You know, you know, I think in... if someone, maybe I'm wrong, I might be wrong, but there is, might be Pant Prakash, I'm not sure if it's Gyani Ratan Singh Pangu's writings, but he talks about the actual tortures that the Sahibzade went through. And they were very bad tortures, you know, kneecaps being broken, and the Sahibzade went through a lot. Maybe it's something that, you know, we don't want to show, but often I think we have to talk about that history to appreciate the hardships and the sacrifices that were made by our predecessors, by our gurus, by our Pratan Singhs and Singhaniya. Talking about Char Sahibzade, Mata Gujri, I mean, examples of political prisoners. I mean, we had political prisoner at the age of 5, you know, Baba Ajit Singh, you know, at the age of 5. He was an example of a political prisoner. And Mata Gujri, who was probably in her 80s, I think, 70s or 80s, she had been an elderly lady, another political prisoner. You know, and we forget to say that, you know, that even the picture of the Thanda Burj itself, I mean, the Thanda Burj was a fridge. You know, it was used to store food in the palaces, and that's the purpose of the Burj. That was the purpose of the Thanda Burj. And they say in that time, those of you that have been to India during that period of time know how cold it is in India. You know, and to be at that altitude, you know, you're talking about fridge temperatures, freezer temperatures. You know, and so they're talking about now, I don't know what the situation now is there. I think the Burj doesn't exist, but they've built a Guru Sahib there, a Gurdwara there. Yeah, but often they say that ਉਸ time ਤੇ when the shahidiyan happened in the December time, Singh ਉੱਥੇ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਆ and they do kirtan up there, some of the ransabaiyan ਹੁੰਦੀਆਂ ਉੱਥੇ and everything. They pour water onto the ground and it freezes. From what I've been told, it freezes. That's how cold it was. So to put into perspective, that's where the Sahibzade and Mata Gujri stood and slept through that hardship. And they did it for human rights. They did it so that we could be free, so we could think freely. The psyche of the Sikh doesn't change. The Sikh is a free thinker, and the Sikh has the strength to remain free. And then you got Bhai Mani Singh, Bhai Taru Singh. You know, Bhai Mani Singh stood up for a festival, a celebration to take place in Amritsar. You know, and the consequences were that he was